Hey everybody, good morning. My name's Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio. Of course, I have to clear my throat the minute the show starts. Okay, it's July 27th, 2023. It's a pleasure to be talking to you this morning, and it's going to be an equal pleasure to talk to my guest. I have been waiting about 3 weeks for this show to happen. We're going to have a conversation about student higher education debt with the author of a great book about this. The book is called Crushed. Yeah. How student debt has impaired a generation and what we need to do about it. Okay? The author of the book Crushed is Dr. David Linton, who's a faculty member at the University of Texas in McComb and formerly over at USC's Marshall School of Business. And as I wrote here on site, I have everything linked here, but as I wrote on site, this show's going to wake you up. Okay? I put 2 kids through college. I know a lot of you did. I think David's kids are young, but he's going to have to put 3 of them through. Okay? And he was, as he was working at USC, walking around, he said, look at this place. Okay? Why does it cost so much to go here? Okay, and what are the kids getting out of it? And this book is really worth reading. And I made a note to myself that there's not an economics teacher in the world who shouldn't be reading this book and using it to help explain economics to kids. Okay, better than Paul Samuelson, which I suffered through when I was in college. At any rate, we're going to have a great conversation with David in just a few minutes. I just want to remind everybody, everything we do, we're all about equity at our American Consortium for Equity in Education. And this show has a lot to do with that. The cost of college is an inequitable cost. The cost of debt is an inequitable effect. Okay? Everything we do about equity is over at ace-ed.org. And that's our home website, ace-ed.org, American Consortium for Equity in Education. We have our Excellence in Equity Awards over there. All the podcasts are over there. This one will be over there as well, archived. And, of course, our magazine, which we're pretty proud of, called Equity and Access. It's online. Just click on the cover and enjoy a really good issue. Plus all the other information we have on the website. We work hard to keep it accurate and live and timely. So please go over, check it out. Everything's free over there. And, by the way, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm Larry Jacobs, and it's Larry at ace-ed.org. And enough of me blabbing here. Let me say good morning. There we go. Hello, David. It's Larry Jacobs here.
Larry, thank you so much for having me on. You said that you've been looking forward to this call for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, I have. I definitely have too. I'm familiar with you, and I've reviewed your wiki page, and you're up to 17 books. That's quite impressive. I'm only on number 2. So when I
and I appreciate you doing all that wrong, Larry Jacobs.
Oh. Okay.
That's okay, buddy. Don't you worry about it. I appreciate you doing the work. Okay? I really, really do. Okay? And I think the Larry Jacob, you might be referring to the guy who has my name, okay, who is used to be a professor at the University of Minnesota. Is that correct? Was that the guy you looked at?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. I mean, I appreciate you looking it up. And that Larry Jacobs is extremely well known, okay? I hope I am a little bit, too, in the world of K-12 education, okay? But he's done pretty cool stuff. And, David, I appreciate that. I really do. There's another Larry Jacobs, by the way, who's also not me, and he was an NPR host, okay, for years. And a lot of people would always mix the two of us up. We've never met each other. I was a host on radio in Boston for a long time, and a lot of people thought I was him and he was me. Okay, but it's not quote, quite the same anymore. Okay, so thank you, David.
Well, Larry, I normally wouldn't lead with this story, but I think we have something in common. There is also a professor, David Linton, that shares a couple of things in common in that he's published, but his area of expertise is quite different, and his mainstay book is titled Men and Menstruation. So it's a hit in gender studies classes.
Woo!
That is not.
Yeah. Wow.
So I had some students ask me about that one. So now in my first lecture each semester, I just highlight that my first book is on investment management, not menstruation.
Yeah, I know, and you're going to be teaching that this year at UT, right? University of Texas.
Yeah,
investment management.
Yeah, that's
good for you, man. And I hope you're doing well in this crazy stock market we have right now. Okay.
Yeah. No,
I should get some insider tips from you, but I'm not going to do that today because I'll tell you, David, David, if we can save people, get people to understand about the high cost of higher education, we are saving them. We're going to make them a lot of money, okay? And they can put it to other good use. You know, it's that simple, okay?
I sure hope we can. And I appreciate the platform, because the more we can get the message out, you know, I wrote this book, and because I'm very an inquisitive person, and I wrote a book that I kind of wanted to read, and it's like, why is it so nice? How am I going to afford this? Is it worth it? How bad is the situation? How did we get here? What can we do about it? As a parent, what should I know? And if I were a policymaker, what would I do? And we can go in any direction. In terms of the policies, I almost struggled to write a full chapter, because all the solutions I have scribbled on the back of an envelope. But I happy to go in any direction, and I also appreciate the equity aspect for your show. I also wrote a chapter on that. I hadn't set out to do it, but when I got about halfway into my research, I'm like, you know, this is something I really feel compelled to highlight. So I went ahead and added that to the book. But yeah, no, I'm happy to follow your lead, and I'm thrilled to be here, and I'd love to talk about this topic.
Thank you, and I think that's great. And by the time we're done, we may be tapping into you to do some writing for us in our magazine. We got a lot of readers, and they're K-12 educators, okay? And they need to know, because there is a phrase, and David, I'm sure you've heard this. It's called college and career ready. Okay, we want to make kids college and career ready, and I absolutely hate that phrase. I always say you don't need the college part. Okay, because if you go to college, they're going to help you get career ready. It's redundant. And not every kid can either A, afford college, or B, needs to go to college. Okay? I got friends here. I live in Maine. I'm across the country from. Where are you, in California today? Where are you?
You know, I moved from California to Texas.
Okay. Yeah.
But most of my
Go ahead, finish up. Most of your
Yeah, no, most of my life I was in Southern California.
There you go.
And then Texas during COVID lockdowns. You know, my wife was from Texas, and we had young kids, and just good thing for us to do.
What's being near mom and dad? I get it. That's cool. Yeah. And you know, I was going to say, here in Maine, we're having what's called a standby generator put in, because I live in rural Maine. The electricity goes out quite often. The company I'm using, the owner was very proud to tell me that a lot of his electricians are between 22 and 30 years old. Okay?
Yeah.
And he hired them as apprentices at high school. I'm getting to something here. Okay? And then they went to the community college and worked as a full-time apprentices. And before you know it, at age 21 or whatever, they were fully licensed electricians, each of them making about $80,000, $90,000 a year. Okay?
Yeah.
At age 21, and by 24, a number of them, who he's known for years, by the way, married with a house they bought. Okay? And kids on the way, or kids there, etc. And my point is that college and career ready. Okay? We have to really take a look at college these days. Because higher education right now, and I'm just going to let you get into all your stuff, but higher education right now is not in a good place. Okay? Enrollment is way down. There's controversy, okay, but be it political or whatever. Okay? There's a lot of things going on, and it's extremely expensive. And I'm going to start off with something that I read in your book that just blew my socks off, because I've been saying this for years. William Bennett, the former cabinet secretary, has what's called the Bennett theory of economics with college. Okay, and I'm just going to say what I understand it to be, is that the government will give you a loan for whatever the college is going to charge. So I'm a college, like the University of Larry, and I know that this kid, well, I could charge 60, but I know the government will give him 75. So I'll charge 75. So our tuition is 75 because I know this is guaranteed. There's no relation between the cost of the amount of money I can get. I don't have to cut anything. I'm not even have to add anything. I just have to ask for the money, and the government will get drives. And I put 2 kids through college. Drives me crazy. Drives me crazy. And I had no idea that William Bennett, if I read that correctly, was saying the same damn thing. Dr. Linton, you're nuts. Right.
Well,
you're going to get me going on this show. You're going to get me going on this show, because this is something that bugs the hell out of me. Go ahead. Me and William Bennett. Who would have thought of it? For goodness sakes. David.
Yeah, no, and yeah, the Bennett hypothesis. That was when I read that. I found it was fascinating. That was so he penned an op-ed in the New York Times, something like 1987. It was titled "Our Greedy Colleges," and I think that's when the New York Times was more open to having right-leaning opinions. And he really took it to our colleges. Now, obviously, they pushed back and said that wasn't true. And then in 2015, economists of the Federal Reserve, they tried to look at it, and they analytically tested it. They said, okay, every time the amount of debt that federally subsidized loans are offered to students, how do colleges react? And it was almost exactly what you described. For every $100, colleges raised their price within a couple of years by $60, and they reduced grants by $20. And so, so it's really a thing. And
yeah, it's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. Though I believe it because I'm not very good at economics, but I actually thought of this myself. This is just nuts. It's like you go to the car deal and the guy says, "I won $35,000," and you say, "Well, I'll give you 30," and you start to negotiate. Eventually, the guy you either walk, okay, or the guy comes down. The colleges would just go up. What the heck? It's just borrowed money. Okay, and it drives me nuts. That's the start of this conversation. Okay, David, okay, let me ask you this, okay? Student debt, okay? These days, people with, and again, this college and career ready, while electricians and plumbers, and they deserve it, are making six figures, which they deserve. Don't misunderstand that, okay? Yeah. Is it all worth it these days? Colleges are so expensive. And this is what this, by the way, everybody, the book is crushed. I want to say this again, literally crushed. How student debt has impaired a generation and what we need to do about it. Okay? It's that simple. We got to do something about this. Okay? Because college, it's important to be educated. Okay? But not to the point where it hurts you. Okay? So, David, why is college so expensive and is it worth it? David, Dr. Linton?
Yeah, no, these are all really great questions, and I appreciate it. So the first question is why is it so expensive? And the lens through which I try to answer that is through that of your typical economist. And I know your audience is very well educated, so I'll just kind of run through some of these things.
It is.
Yeah. No, it's a great audience. So some of the foundational assumptions of economics are that you can measure outcomes, and the outcomes are a result of incentives. And so if after you measure the outcomes, you define these as suboptimal in whatever metric, you can then say, okay, well, we need to change the outcome. Well, let's look at the incentive structure that got us to that outcome. And if we're going to create policy, let's revise the incentive structure. So that's a framework through which I hadn't seen anything written, and I wanted to fill that void. And so the first question I had is, well, what are the incentives that lead to people going to college, taking on debt, and colleges to raise tuition to at or above the ability to pay of their students?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so one of the things you highlighted, that the Bennett hypothesis, that was definitely one of them. So it's basically the availability of the debt contributes to the inflation of the cost of college too. There's other academic reasons. The principal agent problem, basically,
I read that.
If you're the agent versus the principal, you may not have a fully incentive aligned. My favorite, which I think rings true with the younger generation, it was a fun story, the Chivas-Regal effect. And if you take a marketing class, you may hear about this. In the 1940s, the owner of Chivas-Regal, which was like a bottom shelf whiskey, decided to double the price to market it as premium, and sales volume actually increased as a result. So the idea was that there was a change in perception regarding the value of it. As the price went up, the perception of the consumer was that the value had gone up as well. On the demand side, there's been a lot of societal pressure, and the example I highlight, and I will try to be as apolitical as possible. So it could so please don't, I hope your audience doesn't read into whether I lean left or right. The one thing I found interesting, 2015, First Lady Michelle Obama and Jay Farrow produced a rap video trying to convince, like, obviously aimed at kids in middle school and high school, telling them they got to go to college. And, you know, if I'm a 10, 12, 15-year-old kid and I look up to the Obamas, of course I'm going to heed that call because they're very successful and they're very intelligent. And if they say you should go to college, you should go to college. So there's a lot of societal pressure amongst teachers, parents, others. And then the last thing I looked at, and truth be told, not a lot of administrators explicitly agreed with me when I talked to them about this, but it's something that I felt compelled to highlight because I think it's really telling. U.S. News and World Report's rankings.
Yes.
And
go ahead.
Whether it's good or bad, these rankings, I think, are really top of mind for administrators, for presidents, for boards at colleges. They know who their competition is. They know where they rank versus their competition. And they are judged by whether they improve or fall behind that cohort of other schools. So they care a lot about improving their rankings.
Right.
And I think that's great to have a motivation and an objective way to measure what you're doing, because what's measured is managed. And so the question is, well, what's really being measured? And so if you look at the components of this is something I found really interesting. Financial resources is one of the inputs. It's how much is spent per student on educating them. So that on the surface, that seems good, because presumably the more you can spend per student, the more the student will get out of it. But the perverse aspect, but the perverse aspect of it is that you spend what you charge at the end of each year. And so if you want to improve your rankings, and there are two colleges that are identical, and one raises its price by $10,000 and then finds a way to spend that $10,000, that college that now costs more will rank better for no other reason than it is spending more on each student.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The question I have, on that, David, is they're spending more. Okay. Right. But what are they spending? They might be spending more, but what are they spending it on? All right. And I'll give you an example. I'll give the place I love. University. I live in New England, in Maine, and I was very familiar when I lived in New Hampshire with the University of New Hampshire. We used to go to their ice hockey games, etc., which is big out here. All right. And they used to have a Snively Arena. Now Snively's still there, but the one I went to was an old ice arena, and basketball, and it was just absolutely a riot and old and fun and all that sort of thing. And then they built a whole new athletic center, and built a whole new lively Snively, if I may, with a gym, for all their students that made the Philadelphia Eagles gym look like a piker, It was unbelievable. And and I'm sure USC can go down to University of Texas, you go to any college. I'm just doing this one from memory. But the point is, what are they spending the money on? In other words, the parents, or the kid are going into great debt. And while I admit it's good to be in physical shape, I do admit that. Does it have to be a country club? Does it have to be, if I may, again, without politics, Mar-a-Lago? Can it be a Holiday Inn as opposed to the Mar-a-Lago? Talk to me about, where's the money being spent?
Right. That's a great question too. And so it varies a lot by school, but the categories that we can look at is student instruction, administration, campus facilities, which you touched on, research, public services, and then like this basket of all other. And when I looked at this data as it kind of moved through time, and kind of what I discovered is that each slice of that pie has kind of been growing almost in lockstep. And so if you rewind the clock like 200 years, what was a college and like what did it involve? Well, it had like a dorm, some lecture halls, some administration, a library, and maybe a place to eat. And that was pretty much it. You're kind of on your figure out how to spend your time. And now these schools are like small towns or cities, and the breadth of services, exactly. The breadth of services they offer is just way beyond the mandate of just giving people an education that will allow them to improve themselves or improve society. Right. And I'm not saying that and like there's no judgment there. And certain things like mental health treatments for undergraduates, which wasn't really a thing when I was in college, but now it's becoming increasingly important. That can be a really good thing. The having gyms in general, I think, is a good thing. Having dorms, having dorms in hot areas that are fully air conditioned. I spent a summer at the University of Michigan a long time ago. I was at camp. It was a debate camp, and it was like 100 degrees. I had no air conditioning, and how could I possibly? Yeah, I'm sure the dorms are air conditioned now, but there are certain facility upgrades which I can appreciate. But where it gets out of control is, and this is language that others in academia have used, and so I won't name them, but they describe it as like an arms race, a facilities arms race.
That's exactly what it is. It's a competition. Yeah, it's a competition. Yeah. How many nuclear weapons do we need to beat the other guy? Yeah, it's the same. It is an arms race. Yeah. Yeah, and so it's almost never ending. It's like one of your competing schools announces they have a new gym, so you start planning on a new gym. They're going to put new door. Yeah. And when I was writing this chapter, I showed my daughter, who at the time was 8 years old, walks in. She's like, "What's that, Dad?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's at LSU." She's like, "It just says LSU." I'm like, "No, that's a lazy river. This is from above." She's like, "Oh, can I go there?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this worked brilliantly." Now my daughter wants to go to LSU because it has this absolutely amazing lazy river that spills out LSU. And so there's all sorts of So to be fair, I think student instruction has probably improved, especially since the 70s. Class sizes have shrunk. Professors themselves are more educated and knowledgeable. The ability to bring facilities that is like engineering or math or other aspects to life for experts to come in general, I think has improved. There's a lot more administrators. The campus facilities are obviously immaculate. The other things that the students get when they get there, gyms and dorms, libraries, it's also more. So sadly, there's like no one area that we can point to and say that's where they're spending all their money and it's too much. It's just everything that perhaps you and I experienced in the past has just gotten better by an order of magnitude. And so there's no one area. But that doesn't mean that we can't make it a lot better. And that's actually the point. Okay, and then let me just make this: there's been no incentive, okay, to be more economically responsible. Been no incentive for these colleges, okay, and universities. And now all of a sudden, David, if I may, maybe not all of a sudden, but over the last few years, there is incentive. Yeah. And the incentive is that enrollment is way, way down, okay? Yeah. And there's a reason for that. We're going to talk about that, 1,000 reasons for that. But it's true. And one of the big reasons is who can afford it. And again, when you can go to community college for 2 years, become an electrician or whatever, a plumber, a hairdresser, whatever the case may be, and have a very, very nice life. Okay? And, my other thing, and I have to ask you this, and you're a adjunct. Are you consider yourself an adjunct professor right now?
Well, right now I'm considered a faculty lecturer at UT.
Okay. That's good. The lecturers are good. I didn't want to use the wrong title with you. Adjunct professors, and this is nothing against them, okay? This whole thing that has grown over the past 20 years or so, 30 years, whatever it might be, where teachers are where universities are hiring extremely intelligent, well-qualified people, okay, to be adjunct professors, eliminating in most cases that they have to pay health benefits, not giving them enough money to live on. A lot of these professors have to have
Right.
many jobs to cover their expenses, etc. Okay.
Right.
At the same time, tuitions are at an all-time high. All right.
Right.
So that's the student. Let's talk about the student. The student who has an adjunct professor has the wisdom of that professor, but that professor isn't as easily there as needed. That person is not literally part of the community. Okay.
Right.
And
right.
it's somewhere along the line there's a disconnect. Okay, and I'll tell you a story just personally. You'll love this one. It was a college in Western Massachusetts. Okay?
Yeah.
And my friend of mine knew a young lady who had just graduated with a degree in dance. Just graduated. Okay? With a degree in dance from another New England college. Okay? So far, that's okay. All right? That the first college hired her to be an adjunct professor, to teach dance to freshmen at their college. Now, I'm not saying she isn't talented. She probably is, okay? But she is, 3 months ago, a just undergraduate student, okay? And now they're charging full tuition for the class, okay?
Right.
And there's a disconnect in my head about this. And the reason they did that, okay, is because she's cheap to bring on board. She might be very talented, but believe me, she's cheap to bring on board. Okay, it's a break for her, but is it fair to the students? Is it fair to the parents who are paying for this? This stuff drives me. You can hear it on my voice. This stuff drives me crazy, David. It drives me nuts. Yeah. There's no. Yeah, and I have to say, I'm just going to take it for 1 second here. One of the problems with student loans, and you compare it in your head to a mortgage loan, okay? As far as I know, there is no body to assess the value of the loan. They just give the loan. You fill out the paperwork, they pretty much give you the loan. Where if you need a new house, they're going to send out an assessor to make sure they're not loaning you $200,000 for a house that's only worth $80,000. But nobody's doing that. So that kid has to pay, for colleges that use those numbers, $200,000 rather than $80,000, and literally it is crushing. And nobody's managing this. Where's the adults in the room? What's going on, David? You can hear how aggravated I am. I have to stop now. You talk.
No, it's okay. I'm totally with you. And there's so much to unpack there, and there's so much to think about, and it's stuff that I probably spent 2 years in my researching, right? And like, it's only because I've thought this stuff out and put it on paper that I can talk about it with a calm with a calm demeanor.
That's why you're here, Dr. Linton. That's why you're here, as opposed to the host who's more and more aggravated with every sentence. But please go ahead. Yeah. So your anecdote about the young woman that became an adjunct teaching dance. There's definitely been a trend to having more some call it at USC. I was an adjunct, which meant non-tenure track, and at UT it's a faculty lecturer, which is the same thing. Yeah. I don't make a lot. I don't pay enough I don't make enough really to pay the bills. I do it because I want to be a part of the community and the environment. But I don't live on campus or immediately. Yeah, but my point is the college has the money to pay you. The college has the money to pay you. That's my point.
Well, if they want to give me a raise, I would love that. But you're right.
Damn right they should.
Yeah. No, and but I'm just happy. But you're right. And the more tenured faculty there are, I think the greater that faculty lends itself to community for the college. But this is, and schools have found different ratios of tenured to adjunct faculty. And you're right. Quite possibly maybe that young woman is teaching a class for which she's great. I think the question really is, did you need a bachelor's degree in dance in the first place? And
I won't argue that, but I was being polite. Yeah.
Yeah, and so thinking about that, and like when one of my kids likes athletics and likes other extracurriculars like that, and so I thought a lot about that, and what if one of my kids?
This wasn't extracurricular. This was part of the curriculum. This was part of the curriculum. Right. And my point is, this is a young lady who just graduated. They should charge half price for that class, but they didn't. A credit is a credit is a credit. Okay?
Right.
They were getting away with murder. Okay?
Right. Right.
It's like if you go to the doctor and you go in there and the guy who's helping you or the lady who's helping you just graduated from high school. Hello? No, I'm sorry. I want someone a little bit more, just because you had a health class in high school. It's absolutely ridiculous. And all of this is going to – I love your book. I loved your book, okay, because it just brought up all this stuff. And, again, my kids are long out of college, but it's just it's just these same questions. And it's like the old Billy Joel song, somewhere along the line, the rent comes due. And that's what's happening now in education. Now, let me ask you that. Your book nails it, okay? Again, Crushed by Dr. David Linton, okay? So your book nails it. Are colleges looking at this and reassessing and saying, oh, maybe this is the problem? What's going on? What do you see for the future? Yeah. I got other questions for you, but I want to hear this one. Yeah.
No, that's I think when you're kind of off the record, there's a lot of people that agree that there are problems, and they recognize the data every time a new study comes out on the economic value of the education. It looks a little bit worse than the last one. So it's like, what's the internal rate of return or present value of a college net of all your expenses? And every 5 or 10 years, this data comes out, and it looks worse than it did previously. And it's not lost on administrators that there's a lot of majors that don't offer a lot of economic value when you graduate, and the cost of tuition has exceeded inflation for the last 40 or 50 years. So that's not lost on them. They still point to that it's still on average beneficial, and on average you still get more out of it, and on average there are still all sorts of societal benefits, and on average there are personal benefits like improved health or engagement with government or things like that. Yeah, and but at the same time they realize that that this is unsustainable, and now that the issue that you've mentioned, that enrollment is down, and not only is enrollment down the last 2 years, it could further decline because it's a demographic trend. I think there are fewer, something like 10 to 15-year-olds now than there were 5 or 10 years ago, and so you can just see that as that rolls through, then there are going to be fewer people looking to go to college, just due to the demographic component, the rolling nature of the distribution of the population. So there's no clear-cut solution, but the solutions that I did come up with, that some people liked and some people hated, was that there has to be a legislative
that means
solution.
They must be right. That means they must be right. Yeah, that's
right.
Good. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, and I view that as a positive thing. That it, like everybody had like a visceral response when I talked about these ideas. But the legislative solutions have to, and I'm as libertarian as anybody, they have to cap the total cost of what post-secondary education is. Total cost. And the reason why I think that's at the end of the day the only solution, and this has been kicked around in the past in public forums, and it's always been rejected, but the reason that I think this is mission critical when talking to administrators is that cost rationalization is almost never at or near the top of any initiative that's reviewed and then move forward. When people look at what departments will open, what buildings will create, what services will offer, the idea of can we do more with less, can we offer this more cheaply, that discussion is not top of mind. But if there was an upper limit to this, how much they could charge students, suddenly it becomes top of mind. It's how much are we going to get out for each program versus how much do we put in. And then suddenly that becomes very important for them. The other area that I think is critical, and this elicited an even more negative response, which made me more excited about it, was that colleges should have to own a percentage of the debt of the student that's originated after college. And I just threw a stick in the mud and I said 10% each year, and that debt has to be representative of the whole student body. And so if they don't have the cash on hand for that, they can take a loan from the Treasury.
Yeah, let them take the loan. Yeah, let them take the loan. Yeah. So everybody. So now what that does is that everybody has skin in the game. So for example, let's just say a school. Let's just say a school has just math majors and just creative dance majors. Not to pick on creative dance majors, but and we're not picking on them.
Yeah, no. And what they discover, hypothetically, I haven't seen the data, so hypothetically, let's just say that every student graduates with $20,000 in debt, and the math majors repay in full and on time with 100% within 5 years, and the creative dance majors are only at 50%, and they have 50% default. What does that mean for the college? Well, every time one of their creative dance majors defaults, the college takes a big economic hit. So what the college has to do is offer fewer of those majors, lower the price for people who get that major, ensure that they don't graduate with debt. And as a result, any of these solutions will improve the economic outlook of that college. And they will absolutely have to react, because if they decide that, all of our creative dance majors are defaulting, but we think that this is societal good, maybe it is a societal good, but eventually the college will go bankrupt and there will be no more creative dance majors. So they will have to figure out how to make it work. And so they have to have skin in the game. And when you don't have skin in the game, that's when you get these really bad
Well, you got
outcomes.
that right. You got that right. It's all about skin in the game. Okay?
Yeah.
And I mean, and we've removed that. Okay? It's the Bennett hypothesis. We've removed that. You want to charge this?
Right.
We'll give you this. That ain't going to work. And we can show it doesn't work because, just go crazy. And I want to get back to something else. We're going to wind down in a few minutes, but take your time with this. Okay?
Sure. I'm
curious, David. I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, and we're really concerned about this, all about equity. Okay?
Yeah.
And I know as you look at student debt, et cetera, I mean, some people come from economic backgrounds. They can't imagine being in $80,000 worth of debt, even if they get through college. Okay, $80,000. I mean, that's a crush, literally, no pun intended, a crushing amount. Okay, I can't afford that. Okay, so my question is, how does the pricing of college, affect equity? Okay, and that's why every school district and everybody in the education industry and the profession wants people to have a good opportunity if they are the right person. If they can be college bound and do well, they would make, let's say, a good doctor or an engineer. Okay, they should go to college, but they're scared to. Okay, because of the price. Okay. And, you can always buy a cheaper car, but how cheap can you go with a higher rate? Just talk about the equity question.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you asked me that question. And I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't initially think to write that, but when I looked at the data and I completed my research, I'm like, I really have to shine a spotlight on this because this is really impactful. I think that higher education does as much hurt minority communities now as it does to help them, and that's pretty tragic. And I think that may be I don't want to lose anybody when I make that observation, but the data was really disappointing when I looked at it. And so I'll give you a few examples about ways in which higher education, the cost of tuition is setting back minority students. So the Brookings Institute, they put together a study. This is Judith Scott Clayton and Jing Lee. They've both put together a lot of really great research on this. This is from a few years ago. What's the average debt by race. And for Asians, Hispanics, whites, it's the high 20s, but for a typical black student, it's over $50,000.
Yes.
And what is the typical default rate? And black students, it's annually it's closer to 8%, whereas for Asians and whites, it's 1 or 2%.
Yeah.
And to come out with that kind of debt and then have that very expected kind of default rate, it's not what you want at all. Like, you want education to, over time, really level the playing field, and that was the intent of affirmative action. I don't want to get into that.
Of course it was. So we're not. Yeah, like you said, we're not going to get into it, but that was the intent. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it was well intended, but then when you see the numbers, so what is the debt by race? It's overwhelmingly disproportional, and that's in part because of the parents' financial resources as well.
Yeah.
So we talked about intergenerational. There was a study titled "Race, Gender, and the Parental College Savings." This is from 2021 by Conwell, and they looked at how much did parents save for black versus white people? What percentage of those parents saved it? And significant savings. It's not going to surprise me. Significantly more savings for white people. Significantly higher amount of white families had it. And so the starting conditions are disproportional, and so the ending outcome is inequitable. And so this burden of crushing debt is unintentionally placed more on the backs of minority students, and that's not good.
Yeah. So where do we go from here regarding this? And I know we all know there's this big controversy right now. I don't know if it's controversy, but this big challenge with affirmative action. Okay. Yeah. And, it affects a lot of people. Okay. But I think my own personal feeling is in the end, it might work out for the best. Okay. But I don't know. I want people who are eligible to go to college to be able to go to college, regardless of their race, their gender, their religion, whatever the case may be. That's what I want, okay? And, I don't know where it's all going to go, but I'll tell you what's happening now is not good. And let me ask you this, and I just want to ask you as we're going down here. Community college, okay? Yeah. Well, what's your thought on, when I say the word community college, what's your thought on that, being an expert in college economics? And you are, by the way, congratulations. You are an expert. You're a leading expert in college economics. Congratulations. I'm like the Wizard of Oz. I deem you an expert. Yeah.
It's very kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I think community college is a very appropriate alternative to going to like a flagship 4-year school that charges $60,000 to $90,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so to kind of talk about college alternatives, you mentioned apprenticeships. That's a growing program. The electricians, the registered apprenticeship program or industry recognized apprenticeship programs. There's two types. They're filling a really valuable gap. They've got over 90%.
They certainly are.
70, 80, 90,000 a year. I mean, this is like 3 ex-high school graduates, 2 or 3, like 2 years after people graduate. Certificates at community colleges offer a similar aspect. You can get certificates which are like apprenticeships, but you don't have the apprentice or the mentorship program, but you can learn the skills in construction or healthcare or mechanics or welding or comp sci. And, in 2020, community colleges gave 700,000 certificates, and 10 years prior it was about 400,000. So this is becoming increasingly. Yeah, wow. And community college, I think that's also a good low-cost alternative. And I'm going to encourage my kids to strongly consider it.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing that. I believe in that.
Yeah, no, I do too. And I think that I came together with something like a pre-college checklist. And if my kids don't meet these requirements kind of by their junior, senior year, I'm going to encourage them to take a gap year and or go to community college. And some of these things are they self-motivated? So are they doing their homework without me asking them? Can I afford it personally? Do they have any sense of what they like to study, and is what they want to study kind of along with a degree that confers some economic value. Now, and some of the things that I've learned is that the very worst outcome for a college enrollee is to get about halfway through and drop out and have college debt.
Oh, yeah.
And the second worst is they finish it, but they've got debt, and they discover that there's no economic value for their degree. And so those are the two adverse outcomes that we need to avoid. And so if I think that any of my kids, I've got 3, are at risk of those two outcomes, which is about a third of people fall into one of those two categories, then I would encourage community college.
Absolutely. It's that simple. I'm going to tell you a story, okay, as we are going to wind down with this one. But, this is a long time ago now. A friend of mine's daughter was going to go to the University of Illinois, okay? And back then, I think Kate kind of dated. It was around, let's say, $20,000 a year, whatever it was, okay? And, of course, he was going to pay for his daughter's education. So the bill came after she was accepted. You're going to love this story. The bill came after she was accepted, and he handed her a check for he handed his daughter a check for $80,000, 4 years times $20,000. And he said to her, I promised I would pay for your college education. But in reality, this is your money. So I'm making out the check to you. You now have $80,000. Okay? You're going to pay for your own college. Okay? Or you can go on vacation for 2 years. Okay? And spend your $80,000. I don't care. It's your money. But if you pay it, when you're going to find out that if you're paying for it, you're going to do well at it. Okay?
Yeah.
And I always thought that was a great lesson. She, by the way, did graduate in 4 years and did do very well. She's the principal of a school, if not a district administrator at this stage of her career. Okay? Right. And my point is, it put the economics in the pocket of the kid. All right? Now, unfortunately, that $80,000 that he paid for 4 years wouldn't do so well for 1 year these days. So I'm not encouraging people to do that, but there's economic responsibility on both sides. Okay? Yeah. And you have to understand the value of the dollar, and both sides need to understand that. All right? And David, you have nailed this stuff with your book. Again, everybody, it's called Crushed. Everybody knows what I'm talking about there. How student debt has impaired a generation, okay, and what to do about it. This is Dr. David E. Linton, professor, if I may, I'll say that, lecturer associated with the University of Texas at McComb. David, I love this show. Thank you for being with us. Okay?
Yeah,
thank you
so much for having me. I had a great time.
I had a great time, too. And we may tap into you to do a little bit of writing about the equity side if you'd like to do it for us. I can talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it'd be fun.
Shoot me enough. Helpful.
I will. Okay? So that's great. David Linton, enjoy Texas today. It's raining here in Maine, so I hope you have... Actually, you wouldn't mind rain down there right now. What's the temperature where you are?
Yeah, it's been like 100 degrees for the past month, so a little bit of rain.
So it cooled down. That's a joke. Yeah, good Lord. Right, we'll pay for it. Here in Maine, we'll pay for it this winter, I guarantee you. Okay? So, David, thanks a million. Good luck with the book, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye. Well, I guess that says it all. Okay? I love that show. Thank you, Dr. Linton. Okay? Crushed. How student debt has impaired a generation and what to do about it. Okay? Check it out. It's really good. I got it linked here. We'll archive over at ace-ed.org. And please, if you want, get in touch with me at larry@ace-ed.org. Hey, everybody. Have a good weekend.